So one of the things I was looking at working on tonight was doing some kitchen towels. Now, it would be interesting for us to go into hooping something a little more bulky, and I'll see about grabbing some bulkier towels for us to hoop. But for the time being, I bought these awesome, cute kitchen towels. They're Auntie M's rather kitchen towels. They're 25 by 5 by 15 by 5 size towels, and I'll open this one up so that you can see how large it is. And if you follow me on Instagram, the baby's booty, so it's Instagram at the baby's booty, just as it is down here at the bottom of this video, you'll see it says thebabiesbooty.com, but if you take the .com off, that's what our Instagram handle is. You'll see the end result of some towels that I embroidered earlier last week. And hooping these were a cinch. Number one, the lines are already there to help me keep the embroidery straight. And number two, it's pretty thin, you know, so it doesn't take a whole lot to hoop these. And the cooler thing is I was able to use my mighty hoops in order to hoop them. But just for the sake of seeing how well and make sure I'm not out of practice, I did hoop one of them with my regular hoops. So we'll cover a little bit of both of that. But one of the first things I want to show is hooping your stabilizer. Now this is a 4x4 hoop. For those of you who have the smaller, you don't have the multi-needle machines, your mighty hoop isn't an option for you, but there are magnet hoops available for you. So we'll go into that as well. But for the time being, for those of you who are new, your hoops come with two pieces, right? So there's the inner ring and the outer ring. And the whole point in hooping for the embroidery is to hold your fabric still and stable so that as it's moving around and as it's being embroidered on or stitched, it holds it in place and it doesn't move. Because one thing's for certain, if you ever hooped a project and didn't hoop it tight enough or hooped it too tight and it popped apart, you felt the tragedy and the frustration of losing a great stitch out because your fabric and your embroidery design moved on you. So it lost its registration, so to speak. And that's annoying, especially if it's a project that, say for instance, you had an order for a customer of tea towels and it wasn't hooped properly. Well, you just wasted a towel as well. So you would have to replace the towel, buy another one, or, you know, and it's just a wasted product technically, because you can use it in your own kitchen. The towel, in my opinion, never goes to waste. So you have options for those mess ups, but how do we avoid those? And that's the secret to making sure that you get a good secure hoop every time. Now, last week, I believe we reached into the absolutely phenomenal high-end stabilizer holder, and we talked about the different types of stabilizers and knowing what stabilizer goes with what project is a subject for a completely different video for sure. But stabilizers are super, super, super important for embroidery. All right, stabilizers are basically the main backbone to all good embroidery. People argue that, I'm sure, up and down, and there are instances where you can embroider without stabilizer, but they are very few and far in between. And unfortunately, you run the risk of your fabric shifting because you don't have something to stabilize your fabric. So why take that risk? You want top-notch, flawless embroidery every single time, right? That's, you know, the ultimate goal. So why not go ahead and stabilize it correctly the first time? So I'm going to go ahead and cut off some of this stabilizer so that I can show you what we're looking for, or what you should be looking for when hooping your project and getting a flawless hooping. Getting a flawless hooping every time you hoop your project. Okay. So one of the first things you definitely want to do is have your stabilizer cut in as close as possible to the size of your hoop, but not too close to it, and I'll show you what I mean. I know that sounded crazy because it sounded crazy to me, but you want to have some overlap, and I'll show you why. So here, normally for a 4x4 hoop, you would want to go with a piece of stabilizer that's about 8 inches by 8 inches. So this one is cut just a little bit short this way. It's not 8 inches this way, but it's 9 this way. So we're going to work with that and go with it. But 8 by 8 is usually really good. And you don't want to go off of the inner hoop. You want to go off of the outer hoop when you go to do your stabilizer. And that's because you want to have some overlap on your hoop. That way, if you have to give it a slight tug, hopefully you won't have to, but if you have to, you can do a slight tug once it's hooped and try and make sure you have no wrinkles on the back side of your stabilizer, right? Because we want to have it nice and smooth and nice and taut. And we're going to show you what taut is. So I'm going to go ahead and hoop this tea towel on this 4x4 stabilizer and hoop, okay? So let's see if we can't move you just a little bit closer so that you can come over here to the dark side because I need to get extra lighting over here. But for the time being, we're going to go with the lights that we got, okay? All right, so let's turn you more that way and get you going. All right, so here is our outer hoop. Here is our inner hoop. And then here's our stabilizer, which goes under your project, okay? So once you get your stabilizer there, you want to get your project. Now, ordinarily, what I would do, actually, let me move this real quick so I can show this part as well. Find the center from one side to the other side. If you want your embroidery design centered, find your center point. And I generally do that by measuring. Now, this ruler isn't long enough. Actually, let me go ahead and just grab my clear ruler. I love these clear rulers because they show you where everything is underneath and it makes it easier. So this is a 16-inch wide towel. All right, so the center line is 8 inches. And the cool thing is this is already folded and creased at the 8 inches. So that helps me out. But from the top to bottom, because I want my embroidery to be in the lower third of this particular tea towel or kitchen towel. So I need to find the center from there to there. So being that this line is already marked for me, I don't have to worry about that to find the center there. But to make sure that it's where it needs to be from top to bottom, I'm going to measure and find the center here. And this is 12 inches. So that will take us to 6 inches, which is right in here. Okay. Now for me, actually with this particular design, that's going to be perfect. That's going to be perfect. So I'm going to make sure that this is straight. And I'm going to use the mat, the lines on this mat to make sure that I'm lined up exactly where I want it to be. And then ordinarily at this point, what I would do is use a water-soluble marker and draw a line on here. Now, some people don't agree with the water-soluble markers because they say that it's not going to wash out clean. So I use the magic pen. It looks like this. What I generally spray this with is I'll get a spritz bottle of water, which I don't have one right here to show you, but a small spritz bottle of water with just a little itty bitty bit, a couple of, like half a cap full of white vinegar, distilled white vinegar, and shake it up and use that. And this disappears right off the bat. I don't know what that little itty extra bit of vinegar is, but it works and it's absolutely phenomenal. Whereas water alone, this doesn't disappear as quickly. Okay, so then I'll take the water soluble pen, draw a line straight across. I can see it barely, so I'm going to mark it one more time. Make sure it's lined up where it's supposed to be. And I'm going to get back to the questions here in a moment. I'm going to use the fatter side so that you guys can see it better. And there I have my line to let me know where I want the center of my embroidery design to be. Now I'm going to double check that because I know I moved the ruler myself. And ordinarily I would go back and double check. And I did drop it I wanted it a little bit lower than that, but I'm going to leave it where it is. So it's a 1/4 of an inch lower than 6 inches. But that's great for me because this is just a simple towel and it's going to be a really quick gift for another neighbor this time. So the markings on there, remember the up and down is the fold, and the side to side I marked it because the fold is there. If that fold wasn't there, I would have done a crosshair, a line here as well. All right, so what this does is it helps me line up my embroidery. Now on the embroidery hoops, there is a clear grid that comes with a 4x4, and you can use that to line up your design. But on this particular hoop, there are markings on the center of the sides and the top and the bottom, okay, to let you know where the centers are so that you can line up your embroidery. So you would take the bottom, and what I'm going to do is, because this is pretty thin, I'm not going to loosen up my hoop very much, but I'm going to check it right now to see just how snug it is with just the hoop by itself. No stabilizer, right? So I'm going to slide it in, and that's a pretty tight fit. All right. So I know that if I put my stabilizer, which is right here, it's not super thick. It's pretty thin. So I have my kind of thin stabilizer and kind of thin towel. So I'm going to loosen this some, but not a whole bunch, and give it a whole lot more play. Actually, I'm going to loosen it just a little bit more so that I shouldn't have any issues hooping this, because you don't want to go to try to hoop it to begin with and it's super tight and you can't even push it down, and you got to take it apart. Whereas if it's just barely loose, it won't hurt anything and you can kind of tighten it a little bit, even though it's better to get it hooped correctly the first time. All right, so we'll put our stabilizer down, and then I'm going to lay this towel down, and just by looking at the way it is from the pressure and the outline of the outer hoop, it's a little high, so I'm going to move it down some. And this is just eyeballing for right now to make it easier for me to line up this top. So now I'm going to use that purple line there and line it up with the sides guides on this hoop. All right, so it's still a little high, so I'm going to move it down some, just a little bit. All right, and now I put the top part of the hoop in, but the rest of the hoop is up out, right? And I'm able to see that on this side, it lines up perfectly. But on this side, it's just a little high. So that's where you could take a little tug, not super hard, but just a little tug, straighten it up some. It's still just a little high. Straighten it up a little more, and there I have it. It moved both sides down, but I think I'm going to be okay with that. Let's see. Move it up some. And there I have it. And I'm going to straighten it out because I don't know if you can see this. I'm trying to lift it carefully, see if I don't mess it up. See how there's a pucker that is too loose. And it's also not centered now that I'm looking at it. I have it this way, but I don't have it centered that way. Actually, yes, I do. What am I talking about? Oh, yes! I didn't even see it. All right, so let's slightly stretch this. You don't want to stretch it tight, super tight, and have it to where it's just super tight, especially before putting the two hoops together, because if you do that, then when you put the two hoops together, it's going to tighten it even more, because once you put that pressure in and lock these two hoops in place, it's going to add even more pressure and tighten it the rest of the way out the way it's supposed to be. So just a smidge loose, not very loose, but just a smidge. And then we're going to slide these hoops in place. All right, and you shouldn't struggle, but it should be pretty tight, okay? In my opinion, that was still too tight. I should have loosened it a little bit more. But there, you can still see the crease. But as you see, it's pretty smooth right here to have it hooped from the side all the way around. There's not much play in it. and it sounds like a drum. That's what you're looking for. You definitely don't want any wrinkles or puckering or anything with your stabilizer back here. And that hoop still wasn't all the way in the back, but that's how you want to have your project hooped. This is a good hooping. So you see you have your lines, they're lined up. Those lines will save your life. The lines, any markings that are there that will help you keep everything nice and straight. That's what you want. You want your job to be easier. You don't want to have to work super hard and then do all that embroidery and come back and see that the stuff is crooked because you didn't take the time to mark. And like I said, you come back behind it, spritz it with that quick mixture, a whole bottle of water and little less than half of a cupful of the white distilled vinegar, and that will get rid of that purple line. All right.